A community is saying its final goodbyes to a hometown hero who was killed serving his country. Staff Sergeant Benjamin Pennington's funeral was held today. Pennington died from his injuries after a strike on an air base in Saudi Arabia. Wave News reporter Kirsten Foote was there as the community paid their respects.
On Saturday, hundreds of people flooded Central Hardin High School, saying their final goodbyes to Staff Sergeant Benjamin Pennington. As if on cue, rain began to fall. The doors to Central Hardin High School opened up, and the melody of Amazing Grace played by the bagpipes filled the air. Next, a hearse carrying the body of Staff Sergeant Benjamin Pennington exited the school, making its way under a giant American flag hoisted up by 2 fire truck engines. A somber and poignant send-off for an American hero. Pennington, 26, died from his wounds after a strike on Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia. The service was held following a visitation where hundreds of people were seen coming in to pay their final respects. According to his obituary posted online, Pennington's dream and calling in life was to be an American soldier. It also says he enjoyed running on Central Hardin's cross-country and track and field teams. Several people attending the service could be seen wearing Central Hardin cross-country and track gear. Just some of the many people it's clear Pennington left an impression on. On Friday, hundreds more people lined the streets from Fort Knox to Glendale as he was returned home. Pennington will be interred at the Kentucky Veterans Cemetery in Radcliffe. Anyone wanting to support the Pennington family can donate to the Staff Sergeant Benjamin Pennington Dream Fund. We have a link to do that on our website. In Hardin County, Kirsten Foote, Wave News.